Welcome to the Coaching Revealed podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Matzelle. In this episode of Coaching Revealed, I'm joined by Roman Terekhin, a researcher whose work is shedding light on the underexplored area of peer coaching groups. Roman shares his journey from feeling stuck as an entrepreneur to joining a peer group that ruined his ego in a good way. He explains that peers offer a unique kind of support as they have a shared understanding that formal training cannot always provide. Our conversation dives into Roman's research on what makes peer groups effective and sustainable. He defines them as small, egalitarian groups focused on mutual support for ongoing challenges, with his research on established business leaders indicating that confidence building is a major outcome. He also delineates the differences between peer coaching groups that exist with or without a facilitator. A key finding in the effectiveness of these groups lies in Roman's distinction between rigid or push accountability, which is driven by deadlines, and responsive or pull accountability, which is driven by support. His research suggests that responsive accountability is far more effective for the complex, long-term challenges often discussed in these groups. For individuals looking to create, facilitate, or join a peer coaching group, Roman provides practical advice on the framework, with careful consideration towards clear structure, mutual commitment, and balancing group composition for maximum benefit. If you are interested in learning about research or submitting proposals for coaching research grants, please visit theinstituteofcoaching.org. And now, our conversation with Roman Terekhin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Coaching Revealed podcast. My name is Austin Matzelle. I'm one of the hosts of Coaching Revealed, and I'm very excited to be here today with Roman Terekhin. Roman, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'll just go through your bio really quick for our listeners as we get into today's episode within our series focusing on research. So Roman Terekhin, PhD, is a professional lecturer at George Washington University with his research exploring developmental relationships and accountability, with a specific focus on workplace peer developmental groups and peer advisory groups of business leaders. His recent work on peer coaching groups in professional settings has earned multiple award nominations from the European Academy of Management, SHRM, and the Institute of Coaching. Prior to his academic career, Roman led the business development department at a global internet company, Yandex, for 10 years and founded several startups, including a global B2B firm providing research and consulting services to Fortune 500 companies. He is a certified group facilitator and regularly serves as a coach for business leaders. And we've had the pleasure at the Institute to get to meet Roman's work through our last annual conference. Roman was a poster presenter in 2024 with the Institute. And we're really excited to be talking with you more with our audience today about all the work and research that you've done. So thank you so much for joining us today, Roman.
It's always funny to hear how other people talk about me. I always like, well, how do you guys know all that? Thank you for having me again.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And so for today's conversation, would love to get to know, a little bit about you and your research as well. Let's start with, how did you first get interested in and passionate about peer relationships?
It's really an anecdotal story. I used to be an entrepreneur before joining academia. It's an unorthodox career as a scholar practitioner. I worked in corporate world. I was an entrepreneur myself. And when you work as an entrepreneur, sometimes you have this feeling like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm really good at that. My business is growing. I'm like ahead of my competitors. So I'm so great. And then at some point, I joined the peer coaching groups with other entrepreneurs. And it totally ruined my ego. Well, in a good way. It helped me to understand that how I was not great at all. It was good enough to do great business, but there is so much potential ahead. I had read books. I did my classes at a great university. I talked to other people, but it was only when I met with peers I realized how much I may be missing for my potential and for the potential of my organization. I believe that peers have this unique opportunity to give you something that you cannot learn from a business school, at least from a business school professor. As a business school professor myself, I can support this notion. Something that you cannot learn from books. Peers really understand you. They wear in your shoes. They are in your shoes. They can relate to the struggles. They literally go through the same challenges that you face now. When COVID hit, peers were theirs who can tell you what is happening right now, what are the best practices right now. No business school had prepared us for COVID specifically. Peers were there for you. Peers could help. So this is a unique advantage, unique competitive advantage that a business leader or manager or every person can have in their career.
100%. And I think a big reason for that too is understanding that the people who are giving you feedback or information in that dynamic, they're, as you said, as the peer, they're experiencing at the same time. And so the information is really, really grounded in a reality that is similar to yours in some ways, and that gives you an opportunity to feel seen and understood, and the advice is pretty impactful directly. So that's really cool that you were able to gain that insight from your own experience with a peer coaching group. Maybe that has had some impact on your career trajectory. How would you look at your career overall? What has guided you in your career to get to where you are today?
As I said, I am a scholar practitioner, and my first career was in corporate world. And then once I talked to one of my coaches, and she asked me, what do you love doing at work? Your favorite activity? And I started to reflect on that. I realized there are two things that as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, I enjoyed most. First was presenting, delivering our knowledge, sharing our expertise with others. And second was doing some research about what happens, helping the client to solve an unsolvable case, discover something that they don't know. When I told it to her, she was like laughing and saying like, haha, it sounds like a professor's job at a university. And I was like, wait a minute. There is a place when you really can do it like full time. It can be your job. So it was something that I was passionate about, doing research, teaching, and making the impact through discovering new things and disseminating this knowledge. I decided to join a PhD program and to see how it goes. And I was lucky to have Richard Bayatsis as my advisor. He's an incredible mentor and coach. He was not only an expert in coaching domain, but he was a renowned scholar with huge experience in building career in academia, and actually just a fun person to be around. So he helped me so much, not only to understand how academia works, but he struggled with me a lot in switching my mind from this practical set to theoretical, from the question, so what we can do about it, that I always was focused on something like, why is it like that in the first place? He did a great job, and I'm so grateful for him and for other colleagues who I worked with.
Ourselves at the Institute have had the privilege of getting to work with Richard Briotsis a few times. So it's great to hear another, success story from his impact in the coaching field being the collaborative efforts that you've had with him. And within that time, you are getting your PhD in research. And now looking at this current time, what are your current areas that you are doing research in the academic and coaching spaces?
I still enjoy studying peer coaching groups, and I'm a part of coaching research lab at Case Western Reserve University. This peer coaching groups domain is so badly underexplored yet. Most of the studies that exist out there are either theoretical or conducted with students. But when we talk about peer coaching groups at workplace, or those of entrepreneurs or business leaders, their dynamics are so different from what we observe with students. So I devoted last 5 years of my life to exploring peer coaching groups. And it's exactly the case when the more you understand, the more you understand that you don't know anything. The more we find answers, the more questions arise. And right now we're doing like 3 studies. Right now we're trying to understand deeper how these groups work, what makes them effective. And I hope our questions will never end. Especially because when you talk to entrepreneurs or business leaders about this safe space, about this holding environment where they spend remarkable hours, where they are able to be raw, open, real, bring their real struggles and real passions, you learn so much about them. One of the big studies that we have done recently is about confidence. So basically, we started to study how peer coaching groups impact business leaders over time. But it turned out that the biggest impact, unlike how it's perceived from the outside. So usually it's advertised like your revenue will grow, you will grasp new skills or something like that. But when we asked the participants what was the biggest impact, they talked about confidence. They built confidence thanks to this group. And we're talking not about startups, we're talking about seasoned employees. Average age of them is like 45, 50 years. And only after joining the group, they felt they started to feel confident as business owners. I understand why it's not a selling point for these groups, right? It's really hard to say like, okay, business leaders, please join the group, you will become confident now. When we talk about these outcomes, like growing of the business, like learning more, it seems that path there comes through this confidence that they lacked to gain from other places. And here again, peers come very handy.
Definitely. The impact being focused on confidence is interesting to me to hear because that is something that a lot of people are working on. But hearing, this qualitative data from individuals who are pretty well seasoned saying that this type of dynamic, this peer coaching group is one of the things that really raise their confidence is an exciting opportunity for coaches and leaders to consider if that's something that they are wanting to grow or are willing to explore growth in their own confidence. Just to take a tiny bit of a step back then and learn a little bit more about how you got into this space. What was, the impetus for you to begin doing research on peer coaching groups, or what was your initial interest that kind of aligned so that this became your field of expertise and study?
One of the biggest discoveries that I got when I joined peer coaching group myself was a better understanding of my emotions, growing my self-awareness, growing my empathy. And I was so inspired by the role of emotional intelligence in humans' lives that when I was going to do my PhD program, well, when you join a PhD, you should choose your topic, what you're going to study, what are you interested in. And I came to Richard and said I want to study emotional intelligence. And he said, great, what exactly? And I'm like, well, emotional intelligence, it's such a great thing. And he said, yeah, but we've been studying it for several decades already. So do you have any specific in mind? And it took some time to understand what it can be. But my passion was about how my study can make an impact. And I felt that if we help business leaders to grow, to connect with their emotions, to better understand themselves, I didn't know about confidence yet then, but it was about helping them to become better. If we give them this applicable, accessible, cost-efficient tool that they can use whenever they need it, that they can tailor to their needs, it would definitely change them. And through them, it would help their teams, their organizations to change. So this was a very natural choice for me as an opportunity to impact others.
Ready to advance your coaching practice? Join the Institute of Coaching and tap into the world's leading resource for coaching science and professional development. With over 4,000 members across 130 countries, the IOC offers invaluable networking opportunities with an elite global coaching community and innovative learning to broaden your knowledge and keep you at the forefront of coaching best practices. Engage in cutting-edge learning events with world-renowned coaching scholars, from webinars and seminars to discussion groups, research projects, and more. Try any membership free for 30 days. Use promo code IOC Podcast and visit instituteofcoaching.org/join to get started.
And so for these groups, then as you're looking at exploring these peer coaching groups, how do you define them in your research?
There are several characteristics that we talk about when we define those groups. First, these are small groups. This is not huge gathering of people, because with huge gathering, there will be no place for mutuality, for deep dive into each other's lives. It's really hard to keep 100 lives in your head. So these groups are usually 6 to 20 people. Second, these groups are of people with similar status and role. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but they should perceive each other as peers, basically. They have this egalitarian environment in the group. That's why it's peer coaching group. Then they have this regular organized process. They have a pace of meetings, they have a predefined timing for each meeting. Sometimes they have predefined agenda. So these are organized meetings. They're not just we accidentally bumped into each other before Christmas and agreed to meet maybe next Christmas. No, they meet regularly. Usually it's a week or one monthly, but it's some specific organized process. And these groups have very specific purpose, come together to support each other with ongoing challenges, with ongoing development. So they don't just play golf together or share a drink in a bar, sharing things about what happens in their life. They have very specific goal, coming together to help each other grow, coming together to address the problems that they face now. On one hand, these groups are agile. You can bring any issue that you have, anything that's on your plate now. That's the beauty of these groups. On the other hand, this is an organized process, the process that helps you to benefit as much as possible from each meeting. So these are the most important criteria. And interestingly, that when you put all these ingredients combined, even when these groups are organized for business leaders, these tough guys, these brutal or those machos sometimes, right? They are alphas. Many of them feel like they have to be alphas. In these groups, they become so real, so open. Some of them cry. Some of the participants told me that these groups became the first place for them to cry in years. Some of them said that only in these groups they realized some pain points that they had. So being a tough guy doesn't mean you don't struggle, doesn't mean you have problems, but you just don't feel you can share these problems outside. Many of them say, like, with my teams, with my organizations, I have to be a cheerleader. I have to be a person who says, everything will be okay. I got it. Just do your job and I will keep us on the right path. But in reality, they often do not know what to do about that, as many others. Again, when it's a crisis, when it's a geopolitical crisis, when it's a pandemic hits with lockdowns, when political environments shift so dramatically that it has huge impact on many organizations, it's really hard to know exactly what to do in that situation. But they feel that they're outside of their organizations or within their organizations, they should be those self-confident and like leaders, charismatic leaders. And within these groups, they become real. They are people who struggle. They are people who don't know what to do. And it's not the problem that they don't know what to do because it's something wrong with them. It's just being a leader is a hard job. That's why help of coaches, mentors, peers is really handy for them.
This is really, really powerful work. For me, what's coming to mind is hearing about how much community is being built and the value that is being created for all the individuals, and hearing about spaces where people can be vulnerable and express emotions and even cry and be truly authentically themselves. That sounds like such an important thing to be building. And so I'm really glad that we're able to talk about the research that you're doing in what is the impact of these groups and how are these groups built. So with that in mind, are there different kinds of peer coaching groups? How do these groups and their structure appear to the general public?
Oh, there are like dozens of different approaches to organizing those groups, and they tuned for different goals, for different purposes of the participants. So people can choose whatever they think resonates more with their current goals, with their expectations, with their approaches, with their personality. Sometimes these groups are organized within the organization. For example, you can have a group of prospective leaders or just employees. At Microsoft, there was a huge initiative, a grassroots initiative actually, organizing peer coaching groups that grew into thousands of members joining these groups, newcomers, just because they felt it's easier way for them to settle in the big new organization. They feel supported. They navigated this new environment together as a team, not individually. So sometimes you can do it within organizations. Sometimes these groups are organized as inter-organizational groups. When you have, for example, CTOs from different organizations and you put them together and they share experience, it still has to be non-competitive environment. So they cannot be from competing organizations, for example. But they have a lot to share. They have a lot to learn from each other. And they can definitely benefit from talking to peers beyond their organizations. And if we talk to business leaders or business owners, of course, it has to be beyond their organization because they don't have much of a team within their organization. They really are lonely there. So being with these peers has an additional benefit, making them less lonely.
And so I'm curious, within these groups, so some of these groups are created within an organization, and then some, as you said, are the same role throughout different industries. They are called peer coaching groups. So I'm assuming sometimes these groups are going to have a coach present or someone facilitating. And is that always the case? Is it, within these groups, sometimes this is a facilitated group and sometimes this is a group that kind of runs on its own?
First, just a small side note. These groups are rarely called peer coaching groups. These groups are often called peer advisory groups or peer advisory boards or mentoring circles. A few years ago, I had an argument with one of the big organizations that run these groups for business leaders. I talked to one of their managers and said, like, we're doing this study on peer coaching groups. Would you like to join? I presented them the study and they said, like, yeah, this is amazing. But one thing, we do not do peer coaching here. We are peer advisory groups. We are boards of advisors that come together to like support work through giving advice. And I'm like, okay, sure, no problem. And then we do this study. It was a critical incident interview study. We collected the most helpful situations that happened in the group within those peer coaching or peer advisory groups. And indeed, many of the participants at the beginning of the interview shared with me like, okay, this is my group, this is what we do, this is my personal board of advisors. I reach out to them because I don't have my formal board, so these groups really help me to steer my business. And then I asked them about the specific incidents. Tell me about the most helpful situation that happened with you in the group. We got more than 133 critical incidents. None of them was about great advice that they got. So these groups meet for advice, but they benefit the participants with different outcomes. They do not give straightforward advice. For example, they come back with questions. They go deeper. They help you to put your problem into a larger context. They help you to reflect on possible reasons of that, on potential outcomes of that. It does sound like coaching to me. And not only the organizers of those groups not always understand the potential of those groups through coaching, but even the participants themselves do not always understand what they really value there. So this is just a side note about the name, right? There are different names, and we call them peer coaching groups only because it's basically what they do there by the nature of these meetings. What was the question again?
No, absolutely. So I love that side note. That's really, really beneficial in terms of understanding not just how the groups exist, but I guess the way that organizations and people will refer to the groups. So referring to them as peer advisory groups versus peer coaching groups, it's essentially nomenclature. But if that's what is happening in the environment, then that's how more people may be familiar with it. The original question, and we can get into it now, is how are either self-facilitated or facilitated peer groups set up or established?
Okay, I'm glad you facilitate our talk because I'm really passionate about these groups and I can be drifted away with it. Circling back to facilitation. Yes, some groups are facilitated by a professional facilitator. Some are facilitated by a professional coach who not only facilitate the meetings, but coach each of the members individually between the meetings. So he or she knows how these people are beyond the meetings. They know their personal issues. They know what they struggle with. And within the meetings, it helps them to drive the discussion into a direction that would benefit most of them. Facilitators, they just help to run the meeting smoothly, organize it, prepare to it, administrate all the work that is around that. And it is some work because you need a place, you need some preparation, you need to sync up all the schedules and so on. And of course, during the meeting, there is a huge work to preserve psychological safety, to resolve conflicts that emerge, to help the conflicts that do not emerge come to the open. It requires a lot of skills. But some of the groups choose to go with their self-facilitated approach. And there are some advantages to that, actually, at least advantages that they see there. With their self-facilitated groups, it's a higher level of autonomy, for example. They feel that this is something that they drive, something that they are responsible for. And as we know from many studies, when a person knows that it's their responsibility, they are much more engaged and much more responsible. The other big benefit of self-driven, self-moderated groups is this feeling of belongingness. Those who are in those groups feel that having an external coach would harm this experience. They perceive this coach as a just paid professional who has some commercial interest in helping them. Whereas peers are their tribe, are the people who are there for them, not for the money, not for any benefits, but just because this is this mutual energy exchange and support in the group. So this feeling of belongingness to this tribe, as they call it, is really important. At the same time, with professional facilitated, it's really funny. When I talk to these self-moderated groups and ask them, so there are many professionally facilitated groups, would you like to have a professional facilitator? Would it help you? They said like, no. We don't do this because we need this feeling of everyone understands us, this feeling of we have this confidentiality, because we have this mutual connection. But when I talk to those who do meetings with a professional facilitator or a coach and asked, so there are many self-moderated groups. Do you guys need this person who moderates the meeting at all? They said, like, of course, we would fall apart without this person. It would never work efficiently. It would never be effective because, of course, this person is a professional facilitator, right? They know how to organize the meeting smoothly, how to have everyone engaged, how to put a person who is too talkative at bay to allow others to have opportunity to speak, to contribute, or to benefit from the group. They are engaged in preparing. This is their job. It's not like they do some job and sometimes they meet with this group. This is their job. They help the group to be ready. They prepare them. They organize them. They try to preserve this pace of meetings that they have. But what I believe is the most important, they're professionals in creating psychological safety. It's not only about the facilitating process. It's about composing the group. It's about aligning expectations among the participants, helping them to feel that it's non-competitive, safe environment where they can share anything. So both approaches have their advantages and disadvantages. And again, coming back to what I have said earlier, it depends on the goal of the participants. It depends on the needs that they have at this moment.
It's interesting to hear that the professionally facilitated groups, they want to maintain their way, and then the self-run groups, they want to maintain it their way. So each group is getting to really, really enjoy the process that's been created. And as you mentioned, then that just indicates that these different setups provide different benefits for whoever is inside of that group that has been organized. So what I'm wondering about is, what observations have you been collecting from your research on these, peer coaching groups? And what observations do you see about the self-facilitated groups or the facilitated groups in terms of what makes those groups effective?
We actually have published big paper, scholarly paper at the Journal of Organizational Behavior with my co-author Aurora just this year about that, summarizing the findings that we know so far about effectiveness of those groups, what makes them effective. And facilitation is definitely one of the factors that help to make those groups effective. Whether it's self-facilitated groups, whether they are professionally facilitated, it must be organized process. And within those process, there are opportunities to build relationships. There are opportunities to drift more toward giving advice and helping the person to solve specific problem. But whatever it is, they should focus on this process and follow it. The second big bucket of things that we need to keep in mind, in addition to organized process, is proper group composition. So this is about peers. The peers create the content. The peers are those who contribute to effectiveness and to value of the group. So it's really important who you have in the group. And having people with similar experience is really important, right? So they can share their experiences as they were in the shoes of each other. It's really important. But it's also important to preserve diversity of experiences, different functions, different industries, different backgrounds. The more different people you have in the group, the more opportunities you have to learn from them, to have different perspectives, to learn something new, or at least to find some experience that is relevant to the problems that you have now. It's also important how you design the group. How often do you meet? What's the group size? How long will each meeting last? Where it will be? Whether it's online or offline? And again, it depends on the goals that you have. But deciding all that in advance really helps you to be effective. And if we talk about the groups that are organized within organizations, it's really important to separate the sponsor of the group or the manager of the team from the process. I bumped into several situations when a manager who was really interested in creating peer coaching groups was so engaged that he said, like, okay, I will moderate them myself. The problem is that when your manager is present in the discussions, no one will be open. I cannot share with them that I hate my job. I cannot share with them that I'm so tired today that I decided to just staring at my laptop and just playing Tetris and doing nothing. I cannot share these things, although they're important for the group to understand about me, about my struggles sometimes. So it was very poor experience for this group. But once they eliminated the manager, once they decided to drive it on their own, it changed dynamics so dramatically. It really helped them to find their ground, their pace, to bring the issues that they face and not be afraid of anything. this is very important to have these groups self-driven, even if you are so tempted to come to them and say like, hey, remember, this is the organization that is doing this for you. Yes, the organization does it for them, but they need to do this within the group on their own. They need to be autonomous in that.
That's very fascinating to hear about the impact. And it makes so much sense, though, that if a group is dealing with something in terms of their job satisfaction or their desire, interest to be involved in a certain organization, that if certain individuals, such as their manager, is present, that might impact their ability to be honest and be open, which, to throw it back to some of the earlier benefits you mentioned in terms of vulnerability, that really does block some of those major benefits. Within that study that you had come out earlier this year, then, I'm interested, what was some of the background on this study? You've mentioned that this field is one that is relatively new. So what are your participants looking like for these studies? What kind of industries are they in? What kind of size groups are they in that you are exploring right now?
There are two biggest studies that we do now. One is with our business leaders. This is probably one of the most understudied population among peer coaching groups. They are the people who they're maybe the longest. Groups of business leaders on average last for 7 years, according to the statistics of the biggest organizers of those groups. I interviewed many participants who stay with their group for a decade or two. It's really interesting to see that this group is there for them for really, really long. It's like people change in a decade or two of their life, right? And the group should evolve too. So it's interesting to observe how some people stay with the group and keep benefit from it, but others quit the group. Even after several fruitful years, we're trying to find an answer what makes this group sustainable over time. And we actually have a lot of requests from business schools, because some business schools organize these groups for their students, peer coaching groups. But these groups fall apart once the classes end or once the program ends. So what can stick them together? What could help them to stay as a peer coaching group even after they graduate? We're trying to find an answer to this question. And the second big study is about professional coaches. Well, again, it started with peer coaching groups, but we started to interview the facilitators, those people who drive the groups. There are two big questions there. First, what makes this facilitator effective for the group? What about their personality? What about their approach? What about their motivation? How it helps or does not help the group's effectiveness? And second big question there is how these people, these coaches, balance different roles that they have. Because on one hand, they have to focus on the experience of the participants, right? They're responsible for driving them from point A to point B. That's what basically coaches do. But on the other hand, they have responsibilities for their business entity, for the organization where they work, to maximize revenue, to maximize profits. And these roles may conflict. Where should you invest your time in? In marketing or in having additional conversation with the person who struggled in the last meeting? It may have conflict in terms of allocating resources. So how do they balance them? How do they achieve success in all of them? And for that, we interview people successful in one of their facets and not in the another, and vice versa. We also interview those successful in both and not successful in both. So this is comparative analysis. We're trying to get these extreme cases and through that to understand what makes this effective facilitator, what makes effective coach in these groups, and how they build their work to be effective both for the group and for the organization.
What I'm hearing a lot of from some of these data points and some of these questions that you're exploring is a really, really big piece is balancing somewhere between having the group be free form but being structured, somewhere between having facilitators be very caring but also hands off. There's all these different components that appear to be showing up where it's very intentional, and a very light guiding touch at times is kind of needed to be assessing and aware of what is the impact of these decisions being made. Like there's no set way to do these things exactly. And I would like to get into a question on one of the factors that you were looking into within your research paper that you did with the Institute of Coaching, or the research presentation and poster that you had at our conference in 2024, which looked at the ideas of rigid accountability and responsive accountability. So with this question, really interested in what are these two concepts, and then we can get a little bit further into the concept of balance between these things.
This is another great insight for me personally that emerged from my studies, and we're exploring it further with Jeff Reeb, another co-author now. He's a great partner. I'm actually lucky to have many great partners: Scott Taylor, Kyle Amy, Heather Vowell. So these are amazing people who I've been working with. And accountability, there is no doubt in that, is a very important part of peer coaching groups. It's not even a driver of that. Many participants consider it an important outcome. They seek peer coaching groups to hold them accountable, especially for business leaders or entrepreneurs who have no one above them. So accountability is an important part of coaching process, but not all approaches to accountability are the same. Traditionally, what we learn, what we hear, accountability is based on kind of pushing forward and controlling your progress. The drivers of this are fear or shame of being called out and looking bad. But in many peer coaching groups, we found that this is not a prevalent approach. Some groups do it very differently. We call these two extreme approaches push accountability and pull accountability. So usually accountability works like that. The group discusses the problem that a person brings, and after the discussion, the person is asked, okay, what did you hear? What are you going to do about that? The person commits to making some next steps that would benefit them, that would drive them towards the goal, and help to address the problem that they have just discussed. So at the next meeting, when they come back, the meeting starts from asking them, did you do it? You had this commitment. How did it go? And you have to do it, or you have to report and explain why you didn't do that. So it's a kind of a pressure that drives you forward. And it's totally fine, right? It's a powerful tool. Many people enjoy it, or at least benefit from it. But when we talk about the groups that focus on big issues, complex problems, long-term problems, or emotionally salient problems, this control-based accountability or push accountability becomes more problematic. For example, people sometimes do not solve the problem or do not do the steps because there were objective reasons. Remember, it may be a very hard problem, or it may be scary to do these moves. That makes it hard too. Or maybe the initial goal that they defined was wrong. It's not easy to define a goal for many people, especially again if we talk about long-term projects. They may not align it with other priorities, or they may lack resources for that now. Another problem is that when you don't do it, indeed you feel pressure, indeed you feel shame. But doing what you promised to do is only one solution to that. Another solution is start to avoid meetings or start lying to your peers. And some people do this to protect themselves from that shame. So this is the problem that emerges with this control accountability. Moreover, knowing that, experienced participants start to minimize their obligations, their commitment before setting this goal. They just commit only to the things that they are sure that they will do without extra effort. So this kind of counterbalances benefits of this approach to accountability. But we found that more successful groups use the another approach, pull accountability or responsive accountability. It still uses the same approach. It still uses the same three phases: conversation, commitment, progress report. But for each of these stages, they add a very important contribution that makes this approach compassionate rather than control-based. For example, when they have this discussion, it's not only about like, okay, what's your problem? What are you going to do about that? What is there? They are really engaged into this conversation. They are really interested in this person. They really care about what is there. So they help them to understand the issue deeper, to understand what happens, what's the bigger context, what are potential challenges, how it aligns with other spheres of life, with other goals. This is not just, okay, tell us what you want, we will write it down, and we will hold you accountable. We explore it together as a peer coaching group. Then, when we come to the goal setting phase, we are more prepared. And the goal setting phase is different too. So we set the goal, telling this person that it's okay that it's hard goal. Don't be afraid of that, because we will be there for you. We will not just ask you in a month, did you do it or not? You can reach out to us anytime you need us. We will reach out to you and say like, hey, we're there for you if you need anything. Hey, how does it go? Oh, I thought about you today and I found this person who can help you. Let me connect you. You are not alone in it. So it's not only goal setting, but it's goal support. And with progress report, the most fearing part, we will ask you about that, not to make you report to us. We will ask you to see if there is anything we can help you with because we care. It's not only progress report, it's progress report with compassion. This is accountability where these peers are there for you. They are engaged in this accountability not because you asked them to push you hard, but because they care about your progress. They want you to succeed. They are ready to be invested in it. And they really care about the outcomes. They really are interested in like, hey, what's going on there? How did it go? Oh, I'm sorry you didn't do it. Is there anything I can help you with? Maybe this, maybe that. So here, drivers are not fear or shame. Here the drivers are, I'm not alone in it. It's easy for me to move ahead. I will do it because these people care for me. I want them to be happy too. This is a real teamwork. Well, peer coaching group doesn't have a team goal per se, but they have this set of individual goals that they address together as a team. That's how this responsive accountability works. And that's why it's so different from push accountability.
What this is bringing to mind for me is just the idea that when you are pulling, you're really bringing that person in and bringing them into a community space and an environment that's supportive. Whereas pushing does feel more, the focus is the goal. It's a little more isolated. And so the pros and cons of these approaches do really make so much sense. I'm realizing that we are getting a little bit close to the end of our time, and I would love to be able to spend more time with you, but we're going to go for our last question, which will be for people who are listening to this conversation today, for people who are inspired and interested in the idea of a peer coaching group. You having done research in this space about what makes these groups effective, how might you suggest to someone that they would ignite their own peer coaching group? What would be some things that they may want to consider if they are starting on this journey of joining a peer coaching group or perhaps creating one themselves?
This is the question that I usually ask after every interview with the participants of those groups. What advice would you give someone who is willing to join a group? And the most popular answer that I get is just try it out. Just go and try it out. Well, as a scholar, I cannot be that motivating. I can be more specific, right? So I would say that first you should start with understanding your goal. There are very different peer coaching groups out there with very different approaches. What's your expectation from it? What is that you want to get out of these groups? And if you want to do it on your own, that's totally fine. You can just assemble your own group. You don't have to benefit from anyone else, from other organizations. You can try to do it on your own. Yes, it's more effort. Yes, it's more engagement, more resources from you, but it's maybe more accessible, especially if there is no peer coaching group organizer in your industry. Then you have to think about who are your peers. These should be people who not only your peers, so they have similar status and role, but these should be people who you admire, who you want to learn from. Yes, again, similar role, similar status, people who are kind of ahead of you in anything. But at the same time, think about yourself. How can you help them too? What they can admire in you, and make this group as diverse as possible. Of course, you need to keep in mind their goals too, right? What they expect from these groups and how this group can help them. Then you need to talk about specific structure and setting with them. Think about it in advance with them, depending on the goal of you and other peers that you have, the size of the group, frequency of meetings, whether you will meet online or offline. Will you have a predefined agenda or you want to decide it during the meeting? Will you have any homework? Will you establish accountability? And actually, if you want to do it on your own, to make this start easier, you can use one of the existing settings. Some organizations just put on their website outline guidance for each meeting, provided that they focus on specific goal. So you can just choose whatever resonates with you most and adapt it to your own needs. But again, then you just need to try it out. It's really different from many experiences. It's different from group coaching. It's different from working with a professional coaching. It's different from learning it at a business school. So you need to try it out to understand how it sticks. How does it help you personally? How you feel about that? And once you try it out, you need to commit. You need to commit because other peers depend on you. This is mutual commitment, mutual engagement. You need to agree on rules, preserve psychological safety and respect, follow the setting, and follow your obligations. Then these groups will be effective both for you and for others.
That is incredibly sound advice. I feel like a pretty good roadmap to getting started on this journey of engaging with peer coaching groups. I want to thank you so much for your time today, Roman. It's been absolutely wonderful getting to talk with you more and learn more about your research and work. For anyone who's interested in what you do, what is a good way for people to stay in contact with you or follow along with the research and work that you're doing?
First of all, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about the topic I'm passionate about. I can talk about that for hours. And second, I'll be happy to help anyone who is interested in these groups, whether they want to start it on their own or whether they want to increase effectiveness of the group that they are in now. They can reach me on LinkedIn. They can find my email. It's published online, or if we may put it in the comments somewhere, my institutional email. I'll be happy to answer and drive the field forward.
Incredible. Thank you so much for the work you're doing in the coaching and research space, and for helping build these groups and providing research to people who want to build these groups that can make them more effective and provide benefit to more and more people. So really appreciate the time with you today. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to Coaching Revealed, and we will see you for our next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Coaching Revealed, brought to you by the Institute of Coaching. You can learn more about the Institute on our website at instituteofcoaching.org. You can stay up to date with new episodes of our podcast by liking and following Coaching Revealed. You can also find us on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X with the handle Institute of Coaching. We also love hearing from our guests, so please reach out to us with thoughts you have on this episode and any questions you have about coaching. Until next time, this is Emily Tarani with Coaching Revealed.